welcome back. At our last session, we talked about the goal for your group and why it's important for everyone to be pursuing that same goal. We also ask you to do 3 things as you pursue not just connection, but community with those in your group. We ask you to show up, to join in, and to be real. In this final session, we're going to talk about the one thing that it will most shape your growth and the community that you'll experience with this group. This one thing is ownership. The idea of ownership isn't something we always think about when it comes to our spiritual life or being in a life group, but it's vitally important. And because this idea is so critical, we're going to talk about our spiritual growth first, and then we'll cover owning our group experience. It can be tough to know where to start as it relates to owning our growth spiritually. If I were to ask you what spiritual growth looks like, your first response might be a list of things to do. And those might be a part of the process, but it's important to begin with the what before we jump into the how. Let me explain a little bit more by sharing a picture for what spiritual growth looks like. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the people who made up the first century church in Galatia. These people, known as the Galatians, have been arguing with each other about the religious rules that they had to follow in order to earn God's approval. Paul told them that the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Paul was telling them that their faith in God has an outflow. When we grow spiritually, there's an inward change that gets manifested in an outwardly love. And what does this type of love look like, you may ask? Well, we can take our cues from Jesus on that. In his earthly ministry, Jesus gave us this response when he was asked, what was the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. See, the basis of spiritual growth is love. It can be tempting to think that spiritual growth is about doing the right things in order to earn God's favor. But before we talk about how we can grow our faith, we have to start with the awareness that God isn't grading us on our performance. He wants a relationship with us. He went to great lengths to make that relationship possible by sending Jesus to earth to die for our sins. When we place our trust in Jesus, we become a child of God, and as a perfect heavenly Father, his love for his children isn't contingent upon our performance. So as we get to know God more and follow him, his love gets displayed to those around us. When we see the grace that God has given us, we show others grace. When we see how generous God has been to us, we're generous toward our neighbors. So if you were to condense what we've talked about into the what of spiritual growth, into a definition, here's what it could be. Spiritual growth is a growing faith in God, validated by a growing love for God and others. Well, with that clarity in place, let's talk about how we can nurture that type of growth, or to say it another way, how can we own our own spiritual growth? There are 5 things we've noticed that grow a person's faith: private disciplines, practical teaching, providential relationships, personal ministry, and pivotal circumstances. Let's start with private discipline. There are things like reading the Bible and praying. They give you the opportunity to spend time with God, and the more you get to know him, the easier it is to trust him in your day-to-day life. Practical teaching is another way we grow our faith. This involves listening to someone provide practical teaching from the Bible. It could look like a Sunday message, a book, a video, or a podcast. All of these things can give you unique insights into how the teachings of Jesus apply to your life. Providential relationships involve those people that God has used to help you grow. Think about that person that has most impacted your faith. Maybe it was a family member who took you to church as a child. Or maybe it was the first Christian who didn't leave you feeling judged. Chances are there's someone who's had a direct impact on your faith and changed your life for the better. Personal ministry involves the ways you've been used by God to help others grow. When we say yes to serving in our church or going on a mission trip, it teaches us how to depend on God in a deeper way. And when we trust him more and more, our faith grows. Finally, nothing causes our faith to grow quite like pivotal circumstances. both the joys and the challenges in life, the high points and the hard times. They all present new opportunities to trust God. And every time you trust God in a good or bad pivotal circumstance, He demonstrates His trustworthiness and your faith gets bigger. Owning our spiritual growth involves having a clear starting place for what growth looks like, and then pursuing the ways in which God grows our faith. It's an ongoing journey that plays out one step at a time in the context of our everyday life. Any step forward is growth, and every step forward is progress. So now that we've talked a bit about what it looks like to own your own growth, let's talk about owning your group experience. The fact is, I've been in a few life groups throughout the years, and my experience in a couple of those groups was drastically different, as crazy as it sounds. It wasn't the leader or even the people in the group that made the difference. It was something I chose. Here's what I mean. I remember signing up for my first group when I was in college, and maybe some of you are in a group for the first time. Right? Well, to be honest, it wasn't something I was too excited about. I mean, I showed up pretty regularly, but I didn't think much about group in between meetings. For me, being in a group was really about checking off that box. It's what I was supposed to do. And so for me, it was just the bare minimum while I was in the group. I never really made an effort to be a part of the group. I didn't talk to or hang out with the other guys outside of Tuesday nights, and I definitely wasn't praying for them. Sometimes I'd read the book that we were studying, and sometimes I wouldn't. And I just faked my way through the discussion. Honestly, most weeks I just showed up, ate the snacks, and rolled my eyes. When the same guy talked the whole time, week after week, it was fine, but I wouldn't say I experienced much spiritual growth, and it pretty much stayed like that until one night our group leader kind of got vulnerable. He opened up and shared some things he'd been struggling with. And I remember he got emotional. It kind of caught me off guard, but something cool happened that night. We all rallied around him and we prayed for him. Well, our leader opening up, it gave me the courage to finally open up about my story and some of the things I'd been struggling with. And I'm so glad I did, because they encouraged me and prayed for me and supported me. I started to see group a little differently. In fact, the temperature of our group began to change in the best possible way. Our group had reached uncharted territory. We started connecting and hanging out outside of Tuesday nights. I began to regularly check in with a few of the guys. And I eventually came to realize that the problem was never my group. It was me. So in each group I've been in since that one, I've decided to do things differently, to give it a little more effort. I tried to get to know everyone to remember what's going on in their lives and ask them about it. You know, sent a text to one of the guys when he had a big client presentation coming up. We all pitched in meals when someone was sick. We showed up whenever one of our group members had something big going on in their life. I stopped viewing group as something I did only on Tuesday. I spoke up during discussion because I actually did the studies this time and we talked about real stuff. I tracked along with these guys and saw firsthand what God was up to in their lives. And you know what that helped me see what God was up to in my own life? It was a way more worthwhile group experience because I started taking personal ownership, and it made all the difference for me. And it'll do the same for you. And I'm not the only one who's learned this. We've seen it happen over and over again. Ownership is pivotal to a great group experience. So we want to encourage you to own your group experience and own your spiritual growth. Owning your group experience includes all the things I got wrong the first time and all the things I got right the second time. It means making group a priority, being engaged, bringing snacks, volunteering to host, getting to know each other better, even outside of group. You know, those may seem like small things, but they create a space for life change to happen. As I mentioned in the first session, there are things that can happen in a circle that can never happen in a row on Sunday mornings. When great things happen, like when someone lands a new job or has a baby, or when hard things happen, like when someone gets a scary diagnosis, or hits hard times financially. Those things don't come up in a Sunday church service. But when you're in a circle, you have the chance to be there for each other, to bring dinner, to send texts, to offer support because you know what's happening in each other's lives. And getting off the sidelines and joining in is what owning your group experience looks like. It will take a little time and effort, and it may be a little awkward at first, but it's worth it. Trust me. And if you make the effort, I think you'll find the same thing I did. Your group experience will be so much more worthwhile. And the other piece of ownership is owning your spiritual growth. Here's the bad news. No one can do this for you. But here's the good news. No one can do this for you. You own your spiritual growth. Your group members and hosts will encourage you and support you, but the growth you experience doesn't depend solely on you or solely on how well everything goes with everyone else or how smart your group host is or even the study you do. And remember, spiritual growth is a growing faith in God validated by growing love for God and others. Spiritual growth will come from identifying and taking the next steps with the help of your group. When I opened up to my group about stuff that would have been way more comfortable to hide, they were able to step into it with me. They gave me advice, held me accountable, and pointed out that this circumstance really could grow my faith. And you know what? It did. The relationships in the group have helped me grow, and I've been able to help others too. I've watched guys finally admit and eventually conquer something that they've been struggling with. I've listened while someone worked through what it looks like to be a Christian and to really cut it in their industry. And I've even seen a couple celebrate an answered prayer and welcome home a new baby. The crazy thing is, helping other people grow their faith grows yours too. I think it was part of God's design for us, and it's why we're so glad that you've taken the step into community. The relationships in your group may be new, but they're intentional relationships that you each chose to be a part of this group. Now make the most of that choice by really owning your group experience and your spiritual growth. I didn't realize it back then, but the spiritual growth I missed out on in my first group experience, it wasn't my group's fault. It had nothing to do with our host. It was on me. I was encouraged to show up, join in, and be real. And I showed up most of the time, but I never really joined in, and I never really risked being real. But now that I've started doing those things, I see the benefits and I truly understand why life really is better connected. The fact that you've taken the step to join a group is evidence of your desire to take ownership of your spiritual growth. Taking ownership can make all the difference for you. It's likely that every person in your life group will face some type of pivotal circumstance, large or small, over the course of your group time together. And your group can be the providential relationships that God uses to grow one another's faith. Taking ownership of your group experience, well, it can start with some pretty small steps, like continuing to show up, join in, and be real. Or bringing snacks to your group, organizing a social gathering for your group, or even hosting at your home. So for the rest of this group meeting, we're going to give you a chance to discuss this content. A piece of your discussion will include what we like to call the group agreement. If you're going to own this group experience together, it's important that you're all on the same page about the purpose of the group, when the group meets, and what happens at group meetings. Clear expectations are key to starting your group well, and the group agreement will help you do just that. This brings us to the end of our time together. Congratulations on completing your first study. We really do believe that circles are better than rows. and the individual people that God has placed in your circle have the potential to become a real community, a community that supports and encourages one another as each of you grow in your relationship with Jesus. Thank you for letting us help you launch your life group.